Good day everyone, I'm Trix and we're going to talk about manga and superhero comics and why there's more than just My Hero Academia or One Punch Hero or superheroes in manga. So let's talk about some little unknown superhero manga. When you think of superheroes and manga, the first two images are probably going to be either the bald head of the titular character of One Punch Man or Deku and his rather curly black hair. Both of these series are good in their own regards, and while they are good examples of hero comics or manga or whatever you want to call them, stories, there's a lot in manga beyond these two. There's even spin-offs of My Hero Academia that simply are not talked about enough by other channels or by other people. So let's get started. The first thing I want to talk about is a manga called Shy. Shy has been going since 2019 by Miki Bukimi. This is of course by Akita Shonen in Shukan Shonen Champion. What is Shy? Well, if you think about it, what are heroes? What it is it to become a hero? What is it to have powers that you don't quite understand and you don't quite know how to use? This is the story of Shy, a young girl who gets powers and becomes the defender of Japan. Starting off, this manga is quite hard, or quite not hard exactly, I would say. It won't throw you, but if you push through it, if you push through 3 or 4 chapters, it starts to expand into a story of growing as an individual, how being a superhero affects you, and how people cope with being on the front lines and preventing World War III. The art is phenomenal, and while there is 81 chapters around, Shy can tell a story that it takes some other authors years and years to replicate. Now, while manga is certainly beating Western comics in sales, especially in flats or Tokobon or those like volume versions, graphic novel versions, people tend to ignore the ones that don't have anime series. People tend to ignore ones that aren't on that big list, simply because there's no translations, or people will only want to engage with what's popular, which is really a shame because there's a lot out there. Why did I choose Shy to talk about? Well, in a lot of ways, it does remind me of My Hero Academia. Both are stories of a young person learning the ropes of being a hero, engaging with their powers, getting something. Now, Deku does get his powers slightly different to the titular character in Shy, but you can see them both progress and be more than just a figure, be more than just something that is a regular superhero story. Now, there's a lot of comfort in the way that My Hero Academia works with the battle arcs, and you know, everything's sort of reset and reset. And while there's an ongoing story, there is that comfort of downtime. In Shy, there's a little bit less of that, and it's a little more gritty, and I wouldn't say violent exactly, but it looks at the human condition more, especially of some of the other heroes around. My Hero Academia is, of course, by Kohei Hiroshiki, and it's done by Shushisha and has an English print in Viz. It's also printed at the same time in English on the Shonen Jump app, so there's a lot more to engage with My Hero Academia, and it does feel a lot like the traditional superhero story that people are very comfortable with, and so probably that's why it's a lot more engaging than, for example, the Shy, or the other one that I want to bring up. Moving on from that, Deku and the art style is a lot different to Shy's, and again, it's a lot more easy to get into because of its looks and its appeal. But Shy does a lot more with a lot less, and it's really good. I would advise everyone, if you like superheroes, give it a look. See. Moving on from that, so the second manga that I want to talk about is called Raw Hero. Raw Hero is, of course, by the same author of Prison School. That is, of course, Hiromoto Akira. It is only 41 chapters, and it's completed in 6 volumes, and was published by Kashanda, and it had 4 volumes published so far by Yen Press. So it's a little more accessible than Shy, but this is probably because of the Yen Press and Kashanda deal that they have, so it's probably just one that they've licensed. Right, so what is the story about? Well, it's a little more gritty than Shy in that regard. The protagonist, Chiaki, is basically forced to take a job that he really doesn't want to do, and when on the way to the interview, he stops a pervert without thinking twice. This is a sense of justice for him and leads him into a battle between good and evil. Now, a lot of people will ignore this because of the cross-dressing part of it, and a lot of people will ignore it simply because of the ecchi moments that are in the manga, and a lot of people will, they've read Prison School and they were really disappointed with the ending. Again, the ending is pretty flat here, so I don't know if Hiromoto Akira was told, your manga's ending, wrap it up quickly, or he just got bored of it and just ended it rather quickly. Now, I want to say that I didn't find the ending that much offensive, but a lot of people were quite annoyed by it. This is in Evening magazine by Kashanda, which is a little more adult than other ones. And I know a lot of people have said that this goes a little bit overboard, a lot more than Prison School, but again, it's a little more adult in its context, and it has a larger look on what someone is willing to do for their family, and how far are they willing to become a hero or become a villain for that. I want to compare it a little bit to One Punch Man now. One Punch Man is a little more adult in its context than My Hero Academia. One Punch Man, of course, is by Mirumoto Yusuke. It is rather more comedic, One Punch Man, but I will say that the artwork is really good in One Punch Man because it's developed over time from a simple webcomic into the huge juggernaut that it is in manga and anime. Now, I only liked certain characters in One Punch Man. And I don't like the way that Saitama is rather overpowered. Now, again, it's a superhero manga and you expect that from the protagonist, but I don't know, there's just something about it that didn't click with me, and which is fine, everyone can't like the same things. It's, for example, that like certain superheroes that you won't engage with. For example, I was really never a big fan of Superman, but I could understand why people liked him. I was always a more person who would look at alternate heroes such as Witchblade, such as Lady Death. I looked at a lot of those indie comics that were around the mid to late 90s. Especially Michael Turner's artwork on Fathom, or the Elseworld stories that they'd include. For example, some of the what ifs with or the Elseworld stories with like alternate versions of Batman, such as Owlman and stuff like that. That was really my jam, that type of thing. So I wouldn't read the main timelines. I would just read like the spin-offs or certain characters that I'd like, or the indie comics, because I always enjoyed a lot more about the side characters than the main characters. But that's just been my thing. The third, I just want to mention one other one. And it's a lot odder than those two. And it is probably overlooked simply because it's sort of like a spin-off of Sailor Moon. This is, of course, Sailor Moon V, or Sailor V, by Nako Takeuchi. It is quite an old one. It's basically a prequel. It's basically a prequel to Sailor Moon, and it lays a foundation for a lot of what would become Sailor Moon. So Codename Sailor V follows Minamoto Hiniko, a young girl who discovers she can transform into a fighter, more beautiful and more powerful than anyone. Minamoto takes on the crime-fighting name of Sailor V, and learns she's actually a soldier of justice named Sailor Venus. So it's rather, it builds into the author's secondary work. But it is a really good look at a superhero manga, especially the start of Sailor Moon, which is sometimes largely ignored by its fan base. So this is, if you look at this and you compare it to Sailor Moon, which a lot of people might do, you can see that a lot of the foundation and a lot of the groundwork that she made in this manga, Codename Sailor V, for later on. But yeah, it's just one I wanted to mention because a lot of people will go, oh, Sailor Moon isn't a superhero manga, but its origins are in that genre, and just wanted to mention it. So I just want to do a little bit of a conclusion and then we'll wrap up. In conclusion, comics are a medium that was largely niche, and manga was even more niche. Now, my very first manga was Dirty Pair, which was a rather weird cyberpunk thing. Which was a rather strange cyberpunk thing, and so we were very limited. I was very limited on what mangas we could get. While, yes, technically my first one was Berserk in a French class, the first one that I actually bought and read in Manga Magazine, which was a magazine that we had in Britain and the UK for a while. You would get basically parts of a manga republished in like a larger format, and yeah, that was Dirty Pair. So that was my first exposure to like actually buying one, whereas my first exposure to manga itself was Berserk. But those mangas that I read in those like black big copies of Manga Magazine always hold like a rather special place in my heart, because they were the very first ones that I actually physically got my hands on, apart from those scanned pages in French class, which was a little bit weird because when you're exposed to something in a different format. For example, I was exposed to it in French, and that was with the teacher trying to get us to translate it. And of course, she didn't use all the manga, all the pages in Berserk, but she used enough that, you could get the story. Of course, kids at that point were reading Judge Dredd, which was filled with violence and gore and stuff, so, but that's what I just wanted to point that out. So when people say that manga is beating Western comics, a lot of the time they will tend to point to the ones that are available in a bookstore and not look at the range of superhero manga there is. Now, I've just commented on three basically, and I included Dirty Pair, but that's not really a superhero manga, really. It's more of an action, cyberpunk, dystopian, slice of life comedy type thing. Whereas the other three definitely fall into that bracket, and I would encourage you all to read Raw Hero or Shy. And if you're a big fan of Sailor Moon, taking a look at Codename Sailor V and how it laid the foundation for the juggernaut that became, the giant that became Sailor Moon. There's also Card Capture Sakura by Clamp that you can really look at. That is quite a big or well-known one. Well, at least I'm aware of it. I've never read it, but I'm quite aware of it. But there we go. So a lot of people only tend to focus on what's available in bookstores or what's readily available to the Western market, and that's a real shame because there is a lot out there, and I've barely scratched the surface of superhero manga. I've not touched Astro Boy, for example, which is giant, and I've not looked at a few others which I could. and maybe in the future if this video does well. But yeah, I'll be looking at Shy or Raw Hero independently and reviewing them. But there we go. Thank you all for watching. Sorry it was a bit rambly at the end, but do take care of yourselves, and bye bye.